I used to spend a lot of my summer vacation at my grandparents' house, which was essentially a small farm in the middle of nowhere. And as much as I loved my grandparents, I used to also get really bored. I used to go out and explore some of their land, and would oftentimes go out into the forest that lined their property, despite the fact that my grandma would tell me that I needed to stay close to the house. One year, I had ventured out and found what was basically a small cave near the property line, and I loved it. It was a really small cave, like large enough to fit me comfortably in it when I was about 10, and that was about it. It was large enough for an adult to kind of crawl into, but it would be rather cramped and it would not be comfortable for anyone larger than a child to stay in for more than just a few minutes. I had actually painted one of the walls with my name and some other random things, just to pretty much mark it as mine. It was dumb, but it was my little home away from my grandparents' farmhouse. As I got into my older teenage years, I stopped going to my grandparents' house as frequently, mostly because my parents were more okay with me staying home alone. I hadn't been to the farmhouse for a few years by the time this all happened, as a matter of fact. About a decade ago, my grandfather passed away. So, I actually spent several days with my grandmother at the house to try to keep her company, and to make sure that she was doing okay. On one of the days while I was staying with her, I wanted to walk the property line and make sure things were okay, and after a little while, I remembered my little cave. I wanted to go see if it was still there or if it had been taken over by nature. I headed out to the northern corner of the land, jumped the fence, and headed out into the woods, right towards where the cave was. After a few moments of fumbling with the location, I actually found where the opening was, and was excited to see that it was still there. The next part was the difficult part, which was me trying to figure out if I could even get into the cave at all without getting stuck. After thinking it through, I decided that I could pretty much get half of my body in if I turned the right way, and from there, I should be able to see if my name was still painted on the wall. I get down on the ground and I start to twist myself in, and as soon as I get my head into the cave, I start to smell something putrid. It was pretty obvious that something had died there, which was disappointing, but I just assumed that it would be a possum or a raccoon or something that had scurried away to die inside the cave. It was gross, but it wasn't going to stop me from seeing if this was still my cave. I get my head in, and what I saw was horrifying. It wasn't just a small dead animal. It was numerous dead animals. Like dozens of carcasses were lined up on the back wall. There was also what looked like children's clothing piled off to the side, and what looked like an old doll sitting on top of the clothes. At this point, I was out. I pushed myself out of the cave, not even caring if it was still marked, because something was staying in that cave, and I didn't want to know what the hell it was. As most scary stories go, though, it didn't just end with dead animals in the cave. As soon as I pushed myself out, I started hearing what sounded like growling or hissing. I stood up and looked around, but I didn't see whatever it was that was so angry with me until I looked up. I have no idea what the hell this thing was, but it was about 200 feet away from me, standing in one of the trees and angrily growling at me. It looked human-like, but it 100% was not human. I took off, thinking this creature was definitely going to chase me, but about halfway to the fence, I looked back and saw that this thing was actually crawling on the ground toward the cave, which made this all worse. That thing, whatever it was living there, and it was storing its spare carcasses there. I just kept running towards the house, and I decided that I would forget that this thing ever existed. I never mentioned it to my grandma, and unfortunately she passed away that same year. The estate was sold, so I have no way of going back to see if that thing was still there. And I never got the chance to go back with a camera or anything. I really do not know what I saw, but it looked like some kind of feral human-like monster. It wasn't quite large enough, though. It almost looked childlike. It was small enough to live in that cave. It was nimble enough to climb and stand in the trees as it growled at me. It was seriously creepy as hell, and I hope that I never see anything like it again. And to be honest, I hope that whoever now owns that property never runs into that thing.